Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and it's Wednesday afternoon. I'm delighted to be joined. It's a full house. It's James McKenzie, Patrick McGilp, and John Yogi Hughes. Welcome back to the show, gentlemen. I'm going to start with you, John. I know that you were coming home to go to the big one on the 30th of December. Cracking weekend for you to come back.
Yeah, well, don't tell my family. They thought I was coming to see them over Christmas, but no, obviously just coming for the football. No, it was a great weekend. Actually, it was quieter than I would have done normally because I was trying to organise things with Lawrence and various people, and it didn't work out. I needed to get picked up and go home for something, so I actually celebrated less than I would have done if I'd been at home, which my liver was probably grateful for. No, it was a great game. It's always nice to see people I haven't seen in a while. Also met a few new people who were Acsom too. Cornered me and said, "Oh, Acsom John," and then more worryingly, the guy said, "Twitter John Hughes," and I was like, "All right, okay, this could go badly because this could be someone I blocked." So I didn't even ask. I just moved on. I was like, "This could go very badly," but it was it was great crack. It was it's always an experience as well because I've not used that ticket in a while. My nephew's been using that. We've been using a different one, so that's in the North East Executive, which is a very nice seat actually, just down along from the Green Brigade, closer to the halfway line. So it's I haven't really been in that one since it was my dad's ticket. So since they moved them from the Lisbon Lions, so no, it was great. Although the guy next to me was a boy from Sligo who this was on his bucket list, and he seemed to forget who he was supporting. Because every time, Rangers were dreadful, and every time that big Dessers, whatever his name is, every time he made a hash of it, he was like, "How is he missing that? How is he missing that?" And I'm like, "Just remember who you're supporting, Paul." And the guy and his girlfriend behind me, and he was explaining football to his girlfriend for the whole game. That was interesting. But it was great. It was great to see Kathleen and Bobby Murdoch, Amos Barry, and so friends of ours, it was a great day, and real interesting game for me anyway, because I just thought, maybe come back to it later, but I thought our midfield were just tremendous. I was never in fear at any point in the whole game, just because we looked so solid in the midfield, and we've all been there in those games where it looked like you could drive a train through the midfield without it being stopped, and we looked so solid. It was fantastic. And Bernardo, we've spoken about him. We knew he was the best defensive player in the team. At one point in that game, actually, I think he may have been Celtic's most effective ever player, because going from a man who had less passes than Joe Hart, right? So he had less passes taken out opposition than Joe Hart.
Yeah.
He went from that to a man who had, at that point, 3 shots on goal and scored with 2 of them.
Incredible.
Some strike rate. He had a great game. It's tremendous. And I love the dig. I love the dig in him. I love the aggression in him. Eventually that's probably why he was taken off. I think, the manager thought he was going to get sent off. But it was great to see. Callum McGregor was just imperious. Matt O'Reilly was just excellent as always. And they have to be, because there was other guys who didn't show up, other guys who weren't having a great game. So those 3 boys for me really epitomised the importance of the midfield and how much better we could be with people playing at the top of their game. But we've had, from that point of view there, you were sort of lucky. Bernardo had never played like that, really, apart from the week before. He started to show some promise, and now he's basically, he was playing an absolute blinder. And Callum McGregor, as I say, just superb, and it was wonderful to see just how dominant they were. But there was, there were the same problems with the wings and the same issues at the back to a certain extent. But, you've covered that in a fair amount of detail. But, it was great to see. And, from the last time I was on, It's been a remarkable run of results. 4 games, maximum points. I didn't think that was going to happen. It just didn't look that way the last time I was on.
No, it didn't. And this shows you, I think James McKenzie's the same. James McKenzie, last time you were on, I'm looking through some of the blogs around that time as well. And there was some real genuine concerns around what was happening. And John's picked up on a couple of points I want to throw out to you, the pair of yous here. First one is Bernardo. And we have been giving him loads of credit and kudos. And he's completely changed my mind because I didn't see him contributing, therefore why be there? And it's good to see him. We'll come back to this. Some of the players starting to leave or being ushered towards deals. Some of the guys I'm sure will lose. We maybe would have been better keeping, but we'll come back to Vata later. Bernardo, is there a way, James? Is there a way? Because we're not playing European football. Therefore, the defensive element of our game can, I think, have less of a focus when you consider that, we're on the front foot. We have been in the last 4 games. As John was saying, they are good turnaround and pace, tempo, and indeed the results. Is there a way we can fit Bernardo, McGregor, Hatate, and O'Reilly into the same team? Is it doable? James McKenzie?
You'd have to sacrifice the wingers to do so, I think. You'd play some sort of diamond formation with McGregor as the defensive midfielder, Bernardo and O'Reilly a bit further forward, then Hatate, the creative force in front of the striker. That's probably the way you would do it. But Bernardo is hitting his stride at exactly the right time. With Rio Hatate going off to the Asian Cup, we need somebody to step up alongside McGregor and O'Reilly. And Bernardo looks like he's going to be the guy to do it. For so long, well, for half a season, basically, we'd been wondering, what does Bernardo actually do? What is his strength? Yeah. What is the standout strength in this guy's game? And over the last few weeks, we've been seeing sort of what he's actually good at. And that game against Rangers was probably his best performance in a Celtic shirt so far. Scores an absolute screamer, really sets the tempo in that first half. And he was great. But if you want to fit them all in the same team, it would have to be in some sort of diamond, unless you take an incredible risk and chuck Rio Hatate at left back. I mean, he's played there before. He won the league in Japan, played in that position, and I think he played right back for Celtic before and got 2 assists. It was a crazy good performance from there, but you don't want probably the best creative player in the team playing in the defence. That's not something you want. So you could take a risk and play the diamond, but you'd have to sacrifice the wingers. And I know Luis Palmer's come under a bit of criticism over the last few weeks, but he's still been one of the standout performers this season, probably one of the top 3 Celtic players this season for me. And you've just got Leo Labada back in the team as well. So I think you want him to be starting as well. So you'd be looking at that midfield 3 with Palmer and Abada on the wings over the next few weeks. And then when Hatate comes back, hopefully after playing a few games at this Asian Cup, Rodgers will reassess things from there. But it's a good predicament to have with the midfield. It's having a high quality of options is never a bad thing.
No, it's not. And I was thinking also, I'm going to ask Patrick McGilp this, who's been waiting patiently for me to come to him. I'm going to ask you, Patrick, is there a way of doing it with 3 at the back? And the reason I say that is if you're looking at form, and I'm not having a dig at Taylor, because I think Taylor came into his own last 4 games. We have played far more on the front foot. Brendan Rodgers spoke about it. And I think when we're playing in that way, it suits Greg Taylor. But is there a way that we could play 3 at the back? I mean, if we've got 3 centre-halves, let's say Nawrocki, Scales and a fit Carter Vickers, all on form, then you can get away with having your diamond that James described and your wingers. I know it's all-out attack, but this is Celtic. And, I mean, we're only playing domestic football. I say only. You've got to be a far more cautious team playing in Europe. And I just think play your form players. Keep them all happy. Play them. What do you think, Patrick? Am I just being a wee bit too ambitious there? Because obviously every manager becomes comfortable with their own shape, don't they?
We just sort of want it all. We want all 4 of them to be firing on all cylinders and all playing the same team. But James is right. I mean, he's played fullback in Japan, and I think he did play 1 game as a fullback. I'm not sure if he scored or assisted, but I remember he played quite well. And
St Johnson, St Johnson at home, I think it was it not?
Aye, it was like under Ange anyway. And if you played with wing backs and you had that 3 in the midfield, I'm sure that could definitely work. I'm always quite cautious of changing formation and try to fit as many players like that in the team as possible, because Neil Lennon did try that against Cluj, and he played Callum McGregor at left back, who admittedly isn't as versatile as Rio Hatate, but I think he was quoted as saying he wanted as many technicians in the team as possible. So he had Cham playing next to Brown, and as we all know, it didn't work out so well. So I think with the amount of games that we play, the rotation that's needed, the luck that we've had with injuries this season, I think we should stick with the three that we have, because I think, as John said, that midfield against Rangers worked really, really well. Bernardo, it might only be 3 games, but he's on form, so you don't want to drop him. And then O'Reilly, player of the season, McGregor, your captain, again, unbelievable against Rangers. Just deserved that man of the match award and more. Just an unbelievable player. And, I personally wouldn't tinker with that midfield or the formation, because certainly the last 4 games it seems to be working for Celtic. I'm hoping we can beat Bucky Thistle with relative ease as well, so we can go on a bit of a run, and I wouldn't be tempted to change anything personally.
Yeah, I mean, some really good comments coming in, and I'm keen to get them involved, because there is an element of frustration at the moment. 10 days in, no signings. The first one I'm going to bring up, I don't know if this is tongue-in-cheek or not, but I'm going to bring up anyway. I don't mind a bit of stick now and again, to be honest with you, right? Here we go. I'm going to find it. Basically, we're getting accused of being like, here we are, Paul McLean. In you come, Paul. You guys are starting to sound like the old Celtic View. Come on, Paul. The old Celtic View. The board members used to write the letters in under pseudonyms. Oh, the board are doing a great job and all this kind of stuff. I think the point I was making yesterday, John, was, on the one hand, we're all dying to see that big reveal on social media, and we get involved in the transfer madness of these windows and everything else, and there's a real need for gratification in that respect. We all know that we need new players in. But at the same time, I think we've been a bit, for me, I think we've been a bit slack in that respect, signing too many players. And there's been windows where we've brought in player after player after player, and it's, it's not effective. So yesterday, I think, as fair as I could possibly be, but this can only go on so long, of course, I was saying maybe we are being very picky and choosy as to who we add to the squad. It's more of a question of quality rather than quantity. And if it takes a wee while longer, hopefully it'll be worthwhile. I'm trying to be as fair as I can on this, John, because I know a lot of people are unhappy in the comments section about the lack of names coming in.
Well, before we went on holiday, I said I don't believe that we will be rescued in this window. I don't believe there'll be any, maybe massive signings coming in or anything like that. There's just no evidence to suggest that. So, Mark Lowell, since he's come in, has done a terrible job. And I noticed yesterday when I was watching the bulletin, someone said our signings have been like 50-50 in terms of success. That's just not true at all. Since Mark Lowell came in, our signings have been 10%, 20% maximum, if you're being kind, now that Bernardo has started to kick off. If you use the simple metric, who has made our team better? Now, I went through the list and I can go through it again, but there's 20-odd players there. Right? Majority of them not playing or already away and who have not made the team better. And it's a simple metric because there's been, as I pointed out previously, Palmer came in and has been decent in parts. Is he better than Jota? No. So he hasn't made the team better. It's dead simple. So if you go through that, I'll just go through it for the hell of it. Since Mark Lowell came in, excluding loan to buys that were already happening, Siegrist, Bernabe, Moy, who did make the team better, Moritz Jens, Haksabanovic, Abelgard, Kobayashi, Alistair Johnson, Iwata, Holm, Tilio, Yang, Kwon, Narovsky, Larga, Bielk, Palmer, Phillips, Bernardo. Now, just in a very quick reading of that, you'd find it difficult to pick out, who the winners have been from that bunch. So that's a lot of bodies for about, let's say Bernardo's doing well now. Has he made the team better? That's arguable, but let's call it yes. But he's replaced Moy, who did make the team better, but now he's gone. So effectively, Alistair Johnson is the only one there, and he's not playing well at the moment. So from that list, that's Mark Lowe's list. There's no point in saying we're 50% since the Ange era, because Ange's away. And those initial signings, which were good, even Ange dropped off. Once he got his guys in, the signs quality dropped off. So I am not expecting Mark Lowell to suddenly be able to do his job, because he can't do the job. So it's unreasonable to expect a guy who can't do the job to suddenly turn that around. These aren't football players. There's not. It's not. No one ever said when they signed him, I'm sure, that form is temporary and class is permanent. In his last job, when he said, "Oh, that boy was pure class. This is just a blip." So I just don't see it, and he's not. I just don't expect. I think there's going to be a lot of friction here. I think, because I think Brendan Rodgers was very slack in believing what he'd been told. I don't think he did his due diligence on the signings, and in my view, just didn't really do his job properly. And he was maybe sold a pup, but you've got to do your job. You've got to do your due diligence. All those signings were there to be. The signings, the information was there to be interrogated if you wanted to. So, look, it's I think, as I say, unreasonable to expect Mark Lowell to suddenly turn it around. And even with Brendan Rodgers saying, well, we need better players, well, he's going to have it. Mark Lowell was with guys in the pipeline, and unlike in the Ange era, do you remember when it was when we were doing the signings in January and saying the summer signings are already done at this point? And vice versa. We were a window ahead.
Yeah.
And where are we now? And, we're trying to be reasonable here, right? But, they have had a long time to assess this. A long time. And if we still aren't getting the players that we needed in the summer, and now, then you have to ask what is going on. If it was... Quite frankly, if his second name wasn't Lowell, your heads would roll. You would think someone has to be a scapegoat for this, and I doubt very much Brendan Rodgers will go quietly. So, look, I don't expect to be wowed. So, and I think people are setting themselves up to be disappointed because there's no evidence that that's going to happen. There hasn't been since. It didn't happen in the summer. Why should it happen now? Someone explain to me why it would happen now.
The point you make, John, about the type of signings even in the Ange era, because, there is that throwaway remark that the signings were all great when Ange was here, and they weren't, because, that overlapped the period when Mark Lowell came in and as head of recruitment. And we've signed a lot of players who are simply not contributing. If you go hit or miss, there's some you're on the fence with. I mean, James wrote a really good blog about it. He went through the main players. And some of them you're looking at and you're going, well, he might be a hit. He's not been a hit yet, but he might be. And there's one or two that you give a wee bit of credit for. But largely, who has improved to start 11? Very few of them. Very few of them indeed. And the transfer windows that we had in Ange's first two windows, it comes in the summer, facelift required. In January, you needed to get the players in that's going to see through that season. And our hit rate was brilliant. Yeah, there was a couple of flops. James McCarthy was in there. There were one or two, couple of flops. Gucci, who left the club yesterday. But in terms of the hit rate, it was high. And I think we need to return to that this window. But how can you do it, James, as John says, when we've now got a strategy in place, we've got a structure in place in terms of who is at the head of that recruitment. And I'm not saying tear it up, but for this one window, I think we need to do it differently. There needs to be far more focus on the gaffer having an involvement in that, looking at a player and saying, am I going to play him for a kickoff? Because so many of these guys, they're leaving with very few minutes in their legs for Celtic. I mean, Siegrist, people going about McCarthy. Siegrist, with the wages that he's on, James, 2 games of football, 180 minutes, just training all week for a bumper wage at the end of the week. We cannot get drawn into that. We need to be buying players that are going to go into that start 11 and improve it. And my concern is the same as John's, We've got a structure at the moment, and we've got a team in place who have proved that they can't do it. So, is it a case of going back to that situation that Nicholson and Ange seemed to get it sorted in those 2 windows? This time round, it's Brendan Rodgers who's at the helm. Can we do that, James? Is that something that the club will be prepared to do?
Well, how many days into January are we now? 10 days into January, and it's radio silence, really, with regards to incomes. There was more rumours going about towards the end of December than there has been in this January transfer window. I remember we're linked with that Portuguese left back. I was under the impression that perhaps the first week of January we'll have him in the door, but it seems like Celtic are sitting on their hands. They're not really acting. They're not doing anything. Celtic never go from a position of strength to strength. That's been one of the main criticisms. And even these project players that we bring in, how under Mark Law, how many of them have actually, could you say, they've improved? The whole point of bringing these players in is they come in and they become better players at Celtic. How many of them are actually getting better? If anything, most of them are going backwards because they're not getting the minutes to even prove it either. And it's clear that they're not fancied by Brendan Rodgers. Gustav Lagerbielke is looking to be out the door already, and it taking injuries to Carter Vickers and Stephen Welsh for Mike Nawrocki to get a chance. And lo and behold, he's actually all right. He's not a terrible footballer. So it's really strange with the transfer activity the last sort of few windows. And
can I just say, James, the Nawrocki, how we're pronouncing it, the one thing I'd say about him, when he came on in that game, his first 5 minutes was giving me the heebie-jeebies, and then he made a couple of mistakes which he managed to clear up himself. But the one thing that was fairly clear from that and subsequently is it looks to me as if he's incredibly slow. It just looks to me as if at some points he's running in sand. I just thought he looked really, really slow in recovery pace.
I think he's looked. I'm the exact opposite in these first few games at Celtic. One of the things that stood out to me was his recovery pace. When he makes a mistake, he can make up for it by getting back and putting the last-ditch tackle in that'll sort of end any chance for the opposition. I think Nawrocki is someone who can come good, but the problem is there's too many players who don't look like they're going to come good. They're clearly unfancied by Brendan Rodgers, and I always thought that we weren't going to act in this January transfer window. I thought we'd maybe get that Araujo in, but I'd said in the podcast, you can go back and check it, that January's been a window for so long that's just stopgap signings, and you bring in loan players. That's been Celtic's approach to January for so long. So that's why I'm not really as disappointed, because I didn't have high expectations coming into this.
The rumour about Stephen McKenna, wasn't it? And you're like, is that what we need? We need another centre half. We need more centre halves. What percentage of the team is going to be made up of centre halves at this point? It's absolute madness to even be discussing something like that.
See, on the point of Nawrocki, and I'll ask Patrick your thoughts on this, Patrick. I mean, what we've been hearing here is that Brendan Rodgers isn't impressed with the pace of Lagerbielke. That was his biggest issue. And if he goes in this window, and it looks likely, there's been interest already. It looks as though there might be interest even in Italy for Lagerbielke. I think what it does is it dispels any of the myths, or even some of the quotes from Brendan, like what he was talking about at the AGM in relation to rubber stamping the signings. Because if indeed that is the case, and he wants to claim that as his own, then he's got to take it on the chin and say, well, we signed the wrong player. Because you don't figure out that a player's slow once he's been signed. These are kind of things that you can do your due diligence. All the metrics are there, all the detail is there. On the subject of Nawrocki, I'm somewhere caught in the middle of that one, to be honest, because I think he got caught out against St Mirren to the point where Taylor had to sweep up behind him. And I don't know if is he slow at turning. You get defenders who are slow on the turn. I've seen Milk turning quicker. Or is he indeed very, very slow? And another thing, James, sometimes the deception is you're so good at the save and tackle, but why are you doing the save and tackle? Is it because you've not got that yard of pace? I don't know. I'm on the fence with that.
Sorry, Paul John. I was just going to say that the memory I have in the St Mirren game is him just recovering. He's at the edge of the penalty box, trying to make his way from one side of the penalty box to the other. And it looked like someone was doing a sort of bionic man slow motion seen. It was, I don't. Maybe it was just a camera angle. I could be wrong. Maybe James is right. That would be a very rare thing, but it's a possibility. But
the thing is, John, I went for my first run of the year just the other day there, and the wee fella was keeping up with me for quite some distance. So I'd like to think that was a super slow-mo. Honestly, old age doesn't come by itself, as the old saying goes. But yeah, pace was the big thing. Brendan was going on about aggression, Patrick. Pace, tempo, all of these things. And, you bring in the centre-halves. If they've not got the pace, I can understand the frustrations. But there's a contradiction there because Brendan says he rubber stamped the signings. So where does it leave him if we sell Lagerbielke? Because there's an admission that it's not worked out. He was the wrong buy.
Yeah, I think that comment from Brendan's obviously been shown up to be not true, or he's not done his due diligence to the extent that he needed to, because, he said that at the AGM and then contradicted himself ever since then by saying he's not happy with the players that he's got. Lagerbielke is too slow. He's going to be moved on. Nawrocki's pace hasn't stood out to me particularly, whether it's been fast or slow. I was quite impressed with both his defensive actions and his passing. Actually, his forward passing was a lot more ambitious than some of our other centre halves. I think he could turn out to be a good player. I think actually Rodgers said after the Rangers game that injuries have held him back, and that's why he's not been in the squad. He said wee niggles here and there. Again, don't know if that's true. Just got to take it on face value. But I'm hoping we can see a run of him, because I think he only played 2 competitive games before he got injured, and then he's obviously played 2 since he came back. So if he can get minutes against Bucky Thistle, Ross County, and so on and so forth, hopefully turn into a half decent player. When it comes to signings that are needed, I'm not a big fan of Scott McKenna. I wasn't a fan of Scott McKenna when Rodgers first wanted him about 6 years ago. I just don't think he did enough on the ball.
Remember, it was a really inflated price Aberdeen wanted back then, wasn't it?
Million.
I think it was 6 million or something they wanted.
Yeah. What's he on now? A free? Is he a free transfer now?
I think Nottingham Forest want rid of him, so I think it'd be something like that. Aye.
Yep.
Again, it's a bit like Miovski. It's the price that puts me off these players. I wouldn't. I know we've got an inflated squad. I think we've got 32 players, so it's maybe not the best idea, but I don't mind picking these guys up for next to nothing. It's the paying the 4 million, 6 million for guys who look good in an Aberdeen team that I've got a bit of a problem with. Obviously, McKenna's tall, strong, decent defender, but is he the type of player that we need? Is he at Carter Vickers level? Because that's ultimately the type of player we should be attempting to sign. As opposed to, like James said, stopgaps in the January transfer window. I think that's another thing that's disappointed me so far. I'm not so worried about bringing in the 1 or 2 quality players that we need this window, because I don't think there's any rush with the games in late January, early February. I don't think we're in any rush to sign these players, but I think there was an article that came out that we're getting rid of about 8 players, and so far only 1 has actually left. It's looking as if Rocco Vata is going to be the second, which came as a bit of a surprise. I think most people would be quite disappointed to see that. But I think we need to start shifting players out the door, because, as you said with Seagrist, I think James McCarthy is the obvious one. He's a sort of joke figure that everyone talks about. He's not been seen for about a year and a half, but he's taken up something like 20 grand a week. So we do need to move players on as well, because even with Hidiguchi going, I think we're still on 32. And you've got a 26-man Champions League squad. You never use that, so you need to have a squad, 26 maximum, I feel.
Yeah, and he's spoken about it, Brendan, isn't he? He likes to have a squad of 17 with a long list of 24, 25 players. And we've got far more than that. As you say, James McCarthy and Seagrist, they're pulling in the guts of 30 grand a week. No bad if you can get it, John. And then we hear, obviously, of some of the other guys who have been in talks with club. Seagrist, his move broke down. We've got Lagerbielke, bit of interest. Genoa being the latest side, and Bologna are in for young Rocco Vata. Nat Phillips left the building under the radar, and there's a clutch of other players, John. But I'm going to throw a couple at you here, and I want to hear your thoughts in the comments as well. 2 guys who are part of the first team squad. They're in the mix. They're either starting or on the bench. but their futures are in doubt. The first one's David Turnbull, obviously coming into the last few months of his contract, and Mikey Johnston. Good article written by James Mackenzie on the blog. Check it out yesterday. What do we do with these two guys, John? Are these two that you think have to be moving out in January, or are they going to be sticking around for another half a season?
Very simply, get rid of both of them. Look, the problem is, nobody likes to be ruthless, but it's a ruthless business. And ultimately, first of all, can I just say I'm disappointed about young Vata. He wasn't in that squad number of 32 or whatever. I really liked him when I saw him. I know other people didn't, but I really liked what I saw. I thought he was direct and powerful and fast. And I would have liked to see him stay and get a chance, other than the likes of Yang, something like that. You're not telling me those boys are significantly better than him. But anyway, that was disappointing. And obviously, McCarthy, you're talking about joke figure, £1.8 million he's going to take over 4 years, and he's definitely going to get his full money because no one else is going to pay him. Now, the thing about the McCarthy thing was we had no structure at that point, and that was us. Some people in the background, whoever was playing Football Manager at that point, thought that was a good idea. Anne's just said yes because we needed some actual football players in the building. At that point, I think we were down to the youth team. We didn't have anybody. So, it was a desperation move, and that's what happens when you're desperate. You make mistakes, and that was a bad mistake. A 4-year contract for a guy who's basically made of glass. And he's going to take the best part of £2 million for the trouble. But to your original point, David Turnbull is a good footballer. Is he making us significantly better? If of this season of all seasons, if he hasn't nailed down that third spot, you just can't have had more opportunity than this season, because we've been crying out for someone to claim that jersey, to make it their own, and he hasn't done so. So, yeah, he's a good footballer, scores some goals. I wouldn't be fussed about seeing him go at all. Mikey Johnson, same thing. Peripheral, he plays well every now and then. Would I care if he was gone? Not remotely. I'm basically, there's an extent I'm just sick of being, because we want to give the guys a chance, but both these guys have had significant chances. And that's just enough. That's just enough messing about. Let's just move on. Get guys in the building, give them a chance. Get new blood in, get them a chance. Try and unearth a diamond. Mikey Johnson might go into a great career somewhere else. I don't know, but he's too inconsistent, both on the pitch, when he's gone away, he was the same there. So he's just essentially, he will play well maybe for a half. But not a full game. His final ball, his delivery, this is what Rodgers was talking about at the start. You have to do something with the ball. You know what I mean? You have to make something happen. You can't just be. You're not just there to receive the ball and give it back. You've got to make things happen. So he was trying to do that. Unfortunately, for me, it's just not good enough. Again, I always like to try and give these guys the benefit of the doubt, but having Turnbull, I wouldn't care.
I think, when you look at a Celtic State of Mind started in 2017 in the summer, and at that point, Mikey Johnson was an up-and-coming youngster. So we have seen really the development or otherwise of that player's career since the time he broke into the Celtic side to where we are now as a 24-year-old James, and we're still discussing it. I would much rather be in John's camp, and I would be ruthless. I think we need to be ruthless. We need a cull. We need to get these jerseys out the building, and we need to bring in some real quality, going back to the tagline here. And I don't know why we push your foot around the subject, to be honest with you, James. Is it a case of it is difficult to get some of these boys off the roster? I mean, James McCarthy being case in point. And the thing is, nothing against him. Absolutely nothing against him. But he's not played. He's averaging, since he came to Celtic, 3.5 games of football, if you accumulate the minutes, a season. That's what he's averaging. It's horrific. I mean, it was a complete waste, an obnoxious waste of money. And I get what John says, because that's exactly where we were. When you look at some of the early games under Ange, we're preparing for Midtjylland, right? And even in that game, we played Dane Murray. A player who's never been seen since, and I get he's had a bad injury, but we've had to give him his first team debut for Celtic in a Champions League qualifier, followed up by his first start in a Champions League. Unbelievable situation to be in. We were playing Owen Muffet. We were playing Dembele in the early friendly games, and we even pitched up with Tony Ralston. He's the only one of that kind of clutchy players that came through it. So yeah, we needed the leadership, we needed the experience, but 2.5 years down the line, James, surely somebody's not doing their job if we've not moved him on. He's now playing Lowland League. He's playing for the reserves or the youth team. You know, that is where he is now, Celtic B team. But on the subject of Mikey and David Turnbull, what do we do with him? Because Turnbull's going to leave for nothing unless we cash in January. And Mikey Johnson flashes. It's not good enough, though. We need more consistency. We need some, even with 3 guys who play on the wing at the Asian Cup, Mikey Johnson doesn't get a game in the starting 11. So I think that says it all.
Yeah, the thing is with Mikey Johnson, we should have cut our losses with him years ago. I think people could have told you about 2 or 3 years ago that he wasn't good enough for Celtic. You could see it. It was too indecisive, and injuries were hindering any real chances of him sort of pushing on in his career. And he's performing well for the Republic of Ireland national team. Surely someone will see that and take a punt on him, maybe someone down in the English Championship. And I think you're going to get the same with someone like David Turnbull. He's had a bit of a strange season where if you were to just look at his numbers, you'd think he's actually having a not bad season. He's up there with one of our top scorers in the Scottish Premiership, but when you're actually watching him on the park, he's not really set the world alight in most games that he has featured. And now Bernardo is taking his place in the team domestically. But I think with the Scottish national team on the rise, I think Turnbull would want to be a part of that. When he first broke through at Celtic, that was the same season where we had the Euros in the summer, and David Turnbull's in the Scotland squad for Scotland. The last time Scotland were at the Euros, David Turnbull's in the squad. He was a highly regarded young player, but has he really pushed on since then? Has he got much better since that breakout season at Celtic? I don't really think you can say he can. He has, and I think there'll be a place for him in a team down south or even a lower half Premier League team. But I don't see him signing a new contract at Celtic. I think he's going to leave for nothing because he wants to start. You can tell that he wants to start football. At his age, he really should be nailing down a starting position somewhere and getting comfortable. But he's still trying to break into the Celtic team. So I think a move in the summer will be the likely thing for David Turnbull, most likely on a free as well, which is disappointing. With James McCarthy, we tried to move him on. We've made 2 or 3 attempts where there's been bids from other teams, but he gets injured before the medical, and then he can't make the move. I think it was Sunderland that came in for him, and he failed the medical, picked up an injury right before it. I think that was last summer. So I don't see where McCarthy's going to go. What team wants him? Because he's chronically
I can tell you, James, the ideal time to sell it with Sunderland is now, because they've got a boy in charge there that would buy a couple of bridges off you, I think. Tragically. And I feel really bad about that. That's my Uncle Billy's team, you know. I've got a bit of a connection to Sunderland, and I couldn't believe it when they took Beale on it.
Strange move.
Just talking about not doing your due diligence. I mean, football is full of stuff like that. But it's mind-boggling. You're just like, how does that happen? Surely someone does a bit of research. How does it's unbelievable.
It was like the Fleetwood move, Brown out, Johnston in. And you seen Johnston up here for Hibs. The guy was absolutely, he just talked. That's all he did, was talk. He didn't even talk a good game. He just kept talking. And then we've got Big Mogga. We were talking about him yesterday. He's going to be one of these managers very soon who'll have managed 1,000 games of football. You know, he's a kind of safe pair of hands. He's never going to manage a top club. But what is the benefit of shifting him on and bringing in somebody like Mickey Beale? But it's just bizarre. It's bizarre, Patrick, that we're still talking about James McCarthy and Mikey Johnson. But I'm throwing in David Turnbull in there as well, because his is a very interesting situation, actually. No one doubts his ability. You know, you can look at his stats this season and think, why is he not playing? But we know why he's not playing. This is a strange thing. And if we don't cash in just now, you're not going to get much at this stage. He leaves on a free at the end of the season. I think he'll actually go to Italy. The Italian scouts are obviously all over Scottish football, not just for Scottish talent. I mean, it looks as though Lagerbielke might end up over there. And I think Turnbull would do pretty well over there. What do we do with these three guys, these three bodies?
I would get rid of them. I think it's time up.
Ruthless. Patrick just comes in, studs up, get rid.
I might add. I've been a relative. I say relatively. I've been one of Mikey Johnson's OnlyFans. Maybe not biggest
He's got
fans.
an OnlyFans, dearie me.
He'd probably do better on there, perform better. I've been one of his few fans, one of his few defenders. But no, his decision making's woeful. I mean, just that moment in the 91st minute against Rangers where he loses Tavernier, and I thought, oh come on, you've been given one job. All you need to do is mark him for the next 20 minutes, and you failed at that. So he's one of these players. When teams are in a bit of a rut and you need a bit of positivity injected into them, and he might take a guy on and put a ball into the box. But when you're playing for Celtic, you need to be on it absolutely every single week. And he's just not that type of player. He'll be a brilliant, flair player for a mid-table team. Maybe back in Portugal, maybe in Scotland, who knows, English Championship. But he's clearly not a Celtic player. As both him and Brendan have said, he's almost 25. So I think his time's up. And I think there was an article maybe 2-3 weeks ago saying that he's going to be out the door. So I'd move him on. Turnbull, again, I'm a relatively big fan of Turnbull. But he's not consistent enough, and he's not got the pace. Great pass with the ball. Must be one of the best guys to take a shot from outside the box in the whole league. I mean, he's unbelievable, and his goals coming off the bench is pretty good as well. I think James said he's got 7 goals this season or something. So you could say to yourself, right, how do you replace those goals? But as John said, he's not nailed down that spot, and in this season of all seasons, this was his big chance. And just talk about these 3 players, and then if you go back through the years, our squad management has been absolutely woeful. I mean, he might not be a Celtic first team player, but we should be getting money for David Turnbull. I mean, we spent 3.5 million in him, and an English team could have easily paid us 7, 8, 9 million for a player like Turnbull. If you look back at Ryan Christie, only had 6 months left. We get next to nothing for him. Mm-hmm. But yet, guys like James McCarthy get 4-year deals at the age of 30. No other examples spring to mind at the moment, but I'm sure there's been plenty throughout the years where you still got to get rid of guys like McCarthy and Johnston, but there's guys leaving on frees or 6 months to go, and you think, why are we not giving him an extension to sell him? Why have we not sold him at the right time? And Cham, again, left for free. So it's pretty poor squad management, and as you said, to end to leave yourself in a position in the summer of 2021 where you're going in with Dane Murray at centre half, who you've never seen again, so obviously not good enough. But to manage your squad so badly that you end up in that position, and I don't think that's down to the football manager, because I think you've seen with Ange, these guys come in to do a job for 2 or 3 years, and then they either get sacked or they go to a quote-unquote bigger job. They're not there to think about the 10-year cycle of squad management. That should be something like, Mark Lawwell nowadays, and the club should be doing these things, managing contracts, and we've been pretty woeful at it for at least 4 or 5 years now. And it's just another thing on a list of growing problems that needs to be solved.
It's been a problem for ages. Craig Gordon, £5 million bid for Chelsea. Instead of selling him, we give him a bumper new contract. And Cham, remember the £10 million Porto bid? People say it didn't happen. It was reported at the time. He ended up leaving for now. Boyata, was it Fulham? £9 million. And, we bumped that back as well. So, I think it's poor asset management as well. There was that whole thing around Edouard, Ayer and Christie, their values pre-pandemic. So I think you've got to give the club a wee bit of credit for that, because it was a global issue that we didn't see coming, and we lost a lot of millions on those 3 players. But there's been so many examples of it. And like you say, winding down that contract on Turnbull for me is just, it's a situation that it could have gone another way. Even this season, first game of the season, man of the match, David Turnbull scores a couple of goals. But he wasn't able to kick on. What's your thoughts in the comments section? Let us know. I was talking yesterday about the quality Brendan needs, and I want you to have a think and let me know what you think about this. Let's forget for a moment about selling value and just bring in the quality. That might mean that you've got to change a wee bit. It might mean that you bring in a player who's 28 or 29. but it might be that they've got the quality we need for the rest of the season. Will Celtic do it under Brendan Rodgers? Let me know your thoughts. Paul McLean, it isn't happening. We will get excuses, January, difficult time, etc. But same old Celtic. There's a lot of frustrated commenters coming in. Phyllis Kirk, all summer long, people said there is still time to sign players, and it didn't happen. This is unacceptable. 10 days into a window to have signed nobody when they have several months to prepare. Yeah, that seems to be a theme running through the comments. Double Denim, you're in as well. Afternoon guys still feeling a bit unenthused by some of the linked players, but realise the MSM will always throw a few red herrings in there. Agree, we need quality additions to seal the league. This is the thing, John. We don't tend to talk about anybody else unless we're laughing at them because they've been in a meltdown. But this is a situation where we're in a title fight. No doubt about it, John. And the complacency that might creep in will come back and bite us in the backside. Not only at the end of the season if we don't get the job done, but it might also bite us when it comes to Brendan Rodgers, because we've been talking about promises, missold this is our recruitment policy. Look at all these sensational players. That was the word used by Brendan when talking about Kyogo. But, you know, for every Kyogo, we've got a Kwon. So, yeah, we cannot be complacent. We've seen the banners, John, falling asleep at the wheel. Are we a wee bit premature for that kind of talk at the moment?
No, sure, we weren't premature for that time to talk in the summer. This should have been dealt with in the summer. So, and we've seen the results. This shouldn't be a title fight. It shouldn't be anywhere near close. We have no excuses. We have the money. We're supposed to have the systems in place. And there should be no excuses. It shouldn't be close. And you've got a club who are built on foundations of sand, with their hands out begging for money off their directors and soft loans, etc. And they are now, by the sounds of some of the people they're trying to sign, they're going to try and make a fight of this because there's a massive windfall at the end of it.
Yeah,
you're talking much extended Champions League and the money, game-changing money, and it could bring them back on a par with us and put us severely on the back foot. This is a huge threat to us. Now, there's no point in, nobody's panicking as such, but if you wanted to panic, you could do, because this is a real threat to us. It's a real threat to our domestic dominance as well, because if they get this money, that could clear up a lot of problems for them and make them a real challenge for us. And then we don't get the money and we fall backwards, etc., etc. So, it is a real problem. And I mean, the things you're written down, nepotism, complacency, arrogance, and incompetence. So we're complacent enough and arrogant enough to be making appointments based on nepotism, and that leads to the incompetence, which leads us to this. So it is entirely unacceptable. But our structure has been unacceptable for quite some time. I don't know how many times you've spoken about the board and the makeup of the board, but it's been unacceptable for quite some time. Now, let's just be clear about one thing. These are people, right? So your Michael Nicholson's a lovely guy. Peter Lawwell's a lovely guy. You meet these guys, they're very nice men. You know what I mean? They were incredibly kind to me and my family when my dad died. They did a wonderful job for him. So, I don't want to just be besmirching people with this just big, overall homogenous blob of the board, right? These are men. Now, however, the opposite flip side of that is they are just men. They are just guys doing a job. You know what I mean? So, they are not some big machine that you want to be slagging off all as one thing, but at the same time, they are just guys doing a job. And at least one of them is doing a very bad job at the moment. And has been, not to identify who it is, but has been since the 2nd of May, 2022. So, we need to be doing better. It's simply not good enough. And there's no point in pussyfooting around it. And, people say, oh, you're negative, or why can't you just try and be positive? We've won these games, we're on a run. Yeah, and all of that is true. And both of those things can be true at the same time. You know, we have done well in certain respects. We have done very poorly in others. And you just have to acknowledge that and just try and keep a balanced view. Neither cheerleader or bedwetter be, right?
There's a middle point, John. You're right. There is a middle point.
There's a middle point. It's probably when you get pom-poms out when you're wetting yourself, but I don't know what is a middle point. But you know, at the end of the day, you know, you have to just acknowledge the fact that there are systemic problems. And those systemic problems we have brought upon ourselves. And we have the right potential systems in place. The way you avoid a James McCarthy situation is you have someone in Mark Lawwell's role. But the person you have in Mark Lawwell's role shouldn't be Mark Lawwell. Right? So, you know, they were, even when we get it right, we make a hash of it. So, you know, you avoid these random signings from agents by having proper structures in place, but then you put a guy in charge of those structures who's not qualified to do the job. So it's just, you know, we're going round in circles, and it's very frustrating. And that's what I'm saying. I'm trying not to get my hopes up because I just know, you know, I fully expect to be disappointed. So as I said before we went, I'm not expecting great things in this window. And I hope, as I said then, and I say it again, the person who had to take it upon themselves is the manager. So the manager would be responsible for turning this season round. And from that point, we have turned round. And look, you know, some of the players, to be fair, have really taken it upon themselves. As I say, there have been some tremendous performances in the meantime. So maybe guys stepping up to the level. But the gaps in the first team are so glaring in some places, you know, and we have nothing to replace them with. And it's just, you know, the fact that we could lose this entirely down to our own faults and get nothing to do with anyone else, you know, to mistakes that we made, it's just sickening. You know, you're not losing a fair fight. You know, it's like you tied your own laces together before you turned up at the fight. You know, I mean, you try and put someone in the back saying you fall over yourself. You know, it's just bizarre. Anyway, I could go on, and as I usually do, I'll stop there.
No, but you're right, John. That would be the frustration. We heard how Peter Lawwell spoke about we stockpile cash for the seasons where we don't get the Champions League money, and you're thinking to yourself, there's one thing being safe and good and prudent, but there's an overcautious kind of nature to that I don't buy into, because why even have the state of mind that we're not going to win the league? Come on, make sure we do win the league, do the things right. You made me remember, by people who watch this show, particularly on a Thursday, will realise that I'm a music fan, and the 90s was one of my eras of music that I was right into. There was an indie band called The Audience, which was actually Sophie Ellis-Bextor's band before she became kind of famous in her own right. And their biggest hit was A Pessimist Is Never Disappointed, John. That was their biggest hit. A pessimist is never disappointed. And that seems to be a theme running through January. But also, just to prove that it's not a new phenomenon, happy birthday to ex-Celt Stefan Skepovic and also Vakin Bayu. Bayu turns 27 today. Spekovic is 34 years of age. So happy birthday to those two Celtic legends. James, you've not had a chance to talk about not only the meltdown, but the one interesting thing that I found about it was the calls for SFA reform. Unbelievable how these things go full circle, isn't it? I mean, do you think it'll ever happen? The fact that there's been call for transparency within the officialdom of Scottish football all of a sudden. It's not just Celtic fans that are paranoid. I'm all for it. What's your thoughts on it?
It's been crazy, some of the reaction to the derby. I was watching it at Edinburgh Airport. That was pretty strange. People were getting some looks when we were cheering the goals from the corner of the Witherspoons in Edinburgh Airport. But the meltdown has been a bit over the top, to say the least. It's still one going now, is it not? There's still the battle rages on between Rangers and the SFA, and it doesn't seem to have any sign of slowing down, just going at it constantly. But Celtic, we are just completely focused. There's a title to win, and it's Celtic's job to do so. We're on the up. You just need to add to the squad. In January, we need to go from a position of strength to strength. But I don't. Do we have this much of a meltdown when we lose a game? We'll complain about a refereeing decision, whatever. But when you soon realise that the decision made was correct, that's usually end of. That should be end of. But the battle just continues to rage on, and we're just sort of sitting on the outside and enjoying it, aren't we?
You've got to. I mean, one of the brilliant posts that I saw yesterday was, but see in 1986, Patrick, Davy Hay called for Bob Valentine never to officiate a Celtic game again, which makes it all right, obviously, going back to 1986, when Bob Valentine actually was the guy that sent off Tony Shepherd incorrectly and then told him to come back on the park. You remember that game, John? The Skull Cup final, as it was, and Davy Hay went to the sidelines and told his players to come off the park. And then during the week, he's saying, we need to play our football in England and all this. This was 1986. Yeah. But 40 years ago, you said it, so it's all right for us. This is the kind of nonsense we're getting. And it rumbles on. John, you've not actually had a chance to give me your view on this. The SFA reform. Let's get it to Parliament. Let's make it happen.
Well, I mean, clearly, irony aside, they're calling for a restructure of the SFA is the same thing that we've been calling for as long as I can remember, but they're doing it because they feel as if they've been hard done by. It's just bizarre that I don't know that the base this level of rage, and it really is, and it's people have been clipping it on Twitter and stuff. It's fantastic to watch, but it's been demented the way it's still going on. Over a decision which was correct at the end of the day. So was the first part of it wrong? Maybe it was. Does it matter? Not at all. Not at all. It just doesn't matter because it wouldn't have been given. And yet, you would think the moon had fallen. They're absolutely demented, and the SFA does need restructure. And I was having this discussion with people that don't really follow the football the other days. They were talking about referees and, does it really matter because doesn't the best team always win and stuff like this, and doesn't the best team always win the league? And you're like, well, basic fairness, very, very simple things. And if you can't do simple things like we should have full-time referees, those referees should have to declare their allegiances. Where it's not possible to find a higher enough level referee, we should be flying in neutral referees. So good, bad, or indifferent, at least they won't be biased. So at the end of the day, these are basic things, and the SFA refuse to do them. Now, they're taking some action down in England, I believe, to deal with having a regulator, independent regulator, with an overview of the sport, that sort of thing. But the SFA, they want to mark their own homework. They want to tell us all everything's fine and they're great and everything's grand. It's clearly not, because the standard of refereeing, whether you believe they're biased or not, the standard is extremely poor for the most part. So they have the SFA have a number of jobs to do, and they don't do any of them well. So I think that is a massive issue. I mean, even selling the game, the rights, and it's a joke. What is it we worked out? If you won a treble, you're on to about £5 or £6 million. Two games in the Champions League or a treble.
I know.
That's insane. That is absolutely insane. The SFA need gutted. And they always get away with it because everyone basically has enough problems in their own clubs. We're talking on here, and most people will be resenting the fact we're even talking about the SFA because we're not talking about Celtic. But the problems in your own clubs tend to distract you and deflect you away from how bad the SFA is, and they just keep on getting away with it. And I don't know what the answer is to that, because if you have a governing body which you can't effectively replace unless there's some sort of uprising in the clubs, and there's always going to be vested interests there, guys who do better, who want to, are happy enough with the arrangements as they are, don't want to upset the apple cart, all of that. So unless you do like a breakaway league or ignore the SFA, or I don't know how you would go about it, but it's unlikely to happen unless the clubs have an absolute revolution.
Yeah, and by the way, there's there's enough young talent in Scottish football, who could step up to the SFA positions and make it better with, a foresight and ambition and creativity. But again, once you're trying to break that culture, it's going to be very difficult because it's the old pals act. Patrick, I'm going to leave you with the last word today after I bring in George Kidd, because there has been a week. I don't even like to call it negativity. We've been focusing on things that aren't really going our way in the transfer window. George Kidd believes that we'll all be delighted by the time this window closes. I'm going to leave you all with that thought. But before we go, I'm going to ask you, Patrick, in relation to this feeling that there is a job to be done in terms of bringing quality in. And one of the reasons that we're maybe not bringing it in is those who make the final decision are looking at the player and saying, but we can't make money off them if we bring them in. Is it time, this transfer window, is it time to just take that one on the chin, bring in 2 or 3 players, even if we can't make money on them because of their age profile, whatever it may be, and just get them in, win this league? Because as John says before, it's unthinkable what the ramifications of not winning the league are.
Yeah, definitely. We done it in the summer of 2021. There was a recognition that, and we were in a vastly different financial situation as well. I don't think we had the cash reserves that we have just now. There was a recognition at that stage that the squad was in bits and we needed players and we needed quality players, and we got them in. Some of them were young, some were old. Ivanovic, I think, came in at 25. We ended up making money in him. Starfelt, similar age profile, broke even, but he done a job. And you're not always going to make money in every player. I mean, if you look at the players we brought in the last 3 windows, how many of them are you going to make money on? You'd have said maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, you'd make money in Turnbull, but look what's happened, poor squad management. So if you go in with that frame of mind, you're probably not going to sign the players that you might need to sign, but you might still end up losing money anyway. So I think that there needs to be a recognition that we need 1 or 2 quality players. Certainly, if not this window in the summer, a goalkeeper, because that's becoming quite drastic over the past month or 2. I think we need to think long term as opposed to sign a player young, make money on him in 2 years' time, because there's, as people are quite keen to point out, 50, 55 million on the line for the Champions League. And you can definitely make money that way. As John has highlighted, 2 wins in the Champions League is better than a treble. So no, I think you're spot on. I think we need to sign 2 players, regardless of sell-on value, who can add to this squad.
Yes, and we will be following it every step of the way. We'll probably end up doing an emergency podcast the minute we announce a signing, whoever it is. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. 1,000 strong on a Wednesday afternoon. It's been great to get James and John back on the show. I've got to thank every single one of you for your support. If you want to get involved in what we do, just subscribe to the channel. It's all free. Loads coming up. Every single day, we're making changes towards some new shows coming your way as well. All that's left for me to say, James Mackenzie, John Hughes, Patrick McGill, thank you for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.